All right, so what I want to talk about today are custom web components and how you can use custom events to enhance the functionality that you've got inside of the component in a way that this functionality is completely contained inside the component but can be used by the web page. So this is the component that we're building. Now, this is just the basic scaffolding. There's a little header part which we're going to use a slot to feed this content into the component to display it. And then we've got a dialog summary part here. So the detail summary, which opens and closes. Now, that's all just basic HTML that we've got a little bit of CSS applied to it. What we want to be able to do here is we want to have the person who's building the website. So let's say that we are the developer of the component. We want people to use our component, and when they do, we want them to be able to define what the colors are that are going to be used inside the component. And we also want to have a custom event. So every time the user opens this dialog, and only when they open it, we want to have a custom event that goes up to the web page and says, hey, this thing was just opened. So here's the number of times that it's been opened so far. So you can track that thing on the page. Maybe that's a desirable feature on the website. They want to know how many times the dialogues or the detail summary has been opened to be read. So how do we do that? Well, we have the basic layout for our component here. So this is the web page, and there is a component called, and we'll zoom in a little bit here, sample component. That's going to be the name of our component. We've got some CSS that belongs to us as the website developer, not the component developer, but the website developer. They're building the CSS for their website. So this is the CSS for the website. And in the documentation that came along with the component that we're going to use, it said you can define these 4 colors to use inside the component. Now you can use them on the web page yourself. Maybe you've already got colors defined, but if these are the names that you're using, the component will use those as well. So that's our CSS. So we're using it for the H1 and H2, but we're also using these variables, or these variables are being used by the component to define the text in the background, the text in the background colors. In our JavaScript that belongs to the website, so this is in the HTML, we have a script tag here that loads this main.js. This is the JavaScript that belongs to the website. It imports the component. Done. Now the component can be used on the page. The rest of the script here should be what the website developer wants to write as code. What are the features that he wants on the website? He shouldn't have to learn how the script works. He shouldn't have to read the script inside of the component to figure out how it works. He should just be told, okay, here's some color variables that you can use, and here's an event that will be emitted by the component when the user opens up that detail area. So we're done with the CSS. Main.js, we're going to come back and add some functionality because we want to listen for that event that says, hey, this thing's open now. So we will come back to this. The HTML, we're done. There's nothing else that we have to add here. Once we have it and the slot here, we don't need that anymore. Here is the component, the script for the component. Now we've got a template element. We're setting its inner HTML. We've defined some CSS styles. And inside of here, this is where we're referencing those CSS properties, the variables in the CSS. So the primary, on primary, secondary, and on secondary, those colors are being used. Now, if the user who's building the website doesn't define them, we do need fallbacks. So we have that here as well. So this is the color, this is the color, this, and this. Those are the color values we're going to use if the user has not defined them in their CSS. All right, basic HTML, we have the slot with the appropriate name. This is the slot value here, title. So that will be read, and this slot will be replaced with whatever content they have in the main page. So we're using their content for the title, and then details and summary. So just basic HTML. Now, the script for our component. Basic constructor, we're extending HTML to build the sample component. We've defined it here. This is the line of code that makes it possible for the browser to build a sample component element and put it onto the web page. So if you've worked with web components before, this should be straightforward. If you haven't, I've got a link down in the description here to the playlist for web components where I talk about how to build and design and style components. If you're looking for the code for this, you'll also find the link to that down in the description. All right, so we have our shadow root, it's closed. We're cloning this template that we've made up above here, and then we're appending it to the shadow root. So inside the shadow root, there is our component. Okay, so no functionality, no events yet. So this is the point where I want to come up with my own event. I want an opened event, we're going to call it. So when the user comes in here and clicks on this, this is the end user. When they click on this, whether it's opening and closing, I'm going to say that's an event that I'm listening for, and I'm going to track whether or not this thing is currently opened or closed. Well, that's just a basic click event. Really, that's all we're doing here. So I want to find a reference to our details element right here. And I'm going to say every time you click on that, I'm going to call a function that's inside of my component. All right, so let's get a reference first of all to that details element. We'll add it to this object, why not? So this element is going to be shadow root dot query selector, just like you would on any web page. I want to find inside of the div the thing called details. Now, the variable could be called something else. It doesn't have to be called element. I'm just only dealing with one, so that's what I'm going to use. So this dot element is the details here inside of the div, which is inside my shadow root. Now I want to add a click listener to that. So we'll say this dot element dot add event listener, just like you would on any web page. I'm listening for the click event, and when that happens, I'm going to call a function. Let's call it handle toggle. So that is going to be the function that I'm going to call. Now, I don't want this function exposed outside of my component, so I'm going to make it private. So down here, handle toggle, that's going to be my event listener function like this. And right here, I need to reference handle toggle as a private function inside of here. So we're going to say this, which is our component, # handle toggle. So it's a private function, which means you can't actually listen for this on the web page. You can't add a listener or add a listener for something else that calls this function. The developer of the website basically is ignorant of the fact that this thing exists. They don't need to know that it exists. Now, inside of here, because we're using this dot element add event listener, inside this function, if I use the keyword this, what I'm going to be referencing is the element, the details object. But I want this to refer to the component as a whole. So I'm going to use bind right here. So we'll say dot bind this. Right here, this, anywhere that I'm using this inside of the constructor, I'm referring to my component as a whole. So this component is this. Inside of here, without the bind, like I said before, it's going to refer to the element. So we're saying when we call this function, treat the component as the value of this inside of here. So, okay, great, we can do that. Now I can get a reference to the element still, even though I've changed the value of this. I can say, hey, the event target, that is what's written in front of here. So the element, the details, that is the element that we're talking about. That's the thing that was clicked. So fair enough, that is the thing that was clicked. And I'm going to now stop propagation on this. Again, this is private because we don't want the web page to know that this thing exists. We don't want the web page to be able to do anything with this function. Stop propagation means stop the click bubbling up. We don't want the website to know that there's a click event. We don't want a click event to happen here, to bubble up out of the shadow DOM into the web page, and then maybe there's a click listener on something that's around this. We don't want to trigger that. We don't want to have any effect on the website. Just because we're using a click listener inside of our component doesn't mean that we could inadvertently affect something else on the web page. So stop propagation is to stop that event bubbling up. And this is another reason why we want custom events. We want to create that opened event. We've got an opened event inside of our component. The website is not going to have an opened event, or very unlikely that they would have an event called opened that they created and they attached to something that was a parent of this component. So we're sort of keeping it safe for the end user to use our component. So our element inside of here is the details, and it has a property called open, which is going to be true or false. So we've opened the details and closed the details. So we can do anything we want inside of here to say that we've opened or closed this component. Now, to help the end user, we want to keep track of the number of times that this has been opened. So inside of here, we're going to have a variable. We're going to say this, and we know that this is going to work as the component because we did the bind. So this dot, let's say open count ++. So only when it's open will we increment this number. Now again, I don't necessarily want to make this a public variable, because if I make it a public variable, then somebody on the website could inadvertently change the value of this. So we're going to make it private as well. Put the pound sign in front of it to turn it private, just like this function. Now we get the red squiggle here because if you make something private, you have to declare it as well. So we'll come up here at the top and we'll create the open count. There we go. And we can set it to 0 here, or inside of the constructor, we can say this pound sign open count equals 0. So we can do it here in the constructor, or you can set a default value of 0 here. It's going to work the same regardless. So we have a number, we're incrementing it. So now we have this number, and internally, we could write it to the console. So we could say console log this open count with the period, of course. There we go, we save that. And now if I open up the console here, there we go. Now, each time I open this, I should be getting, let me refresh to make sure I get the latest version. No, what did I miss out here? Oh, I've been talking about the wrong event. Here, when this is clicked, this is not a click event that we're listening for. Apologies. This is a toggle event. So if you knew that, excellent for you. Toggle is the event on a details object. So now when we click, yeah, there we go. Okay, so there we have it. And the number is being displayed in the console 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every time we click, we're incrementing this number. So we have the number. It's private. It only exists inside of the class, just like this function only exists inside the class. It's not accessible outside. But we do want to provide it to the website. We do want the developer of the website to have access to this number. Maybe they're going to do something and limit the number and do something else on the page if the person exceeds a certain number. So inside here, what we're going to do is we are going to take this number and pass it up by creating a custom event. So right here, we'll say our custom event is going to be a new custom event. So this is built in vanilla JavaScript. You can create your own kind of event. You could create a new mouse event. So you can create click events, mouse over, mouse out, and so on. But this is a custom event. This is one that's not already defined inside of JavaScript. So it's one that we're inventing. We're going to call it opened. This is going to be the name of the event, and we are going to let this bubble up to the parent. We're going to, right here, say this dot dispatch event and our custom event, CE, this one that we created. That is going to dispatch it on our sample component. So this component right here is going to emit an open event, an opened right here event. That is going to be something that the parent page can listen for. So inside of here, we have a reference to our sample component on the page. And we can say, hey, you know what, this sample component, let's add an event listener for the event called opened. And we'll call it the handle opens function. So down here, function called handle opens, and there's the event being passed in. So console.log, we can look at what's the type of event. This should be an opened event. That will be the type. Whatever you put right here in an add event listener, that is the type. So let's start with that to take a look. Let's refresh, make sure we've got it. Well, again, we're missing. Oh, I didn't save. Saving is very important if you want your new code to run. All right, refresh that. There we go. Opened, 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 opened. So 4 times we've clicked on it, and we've got that event bubbling up to the website. So the person who's developed the website, in our documentation, we're not just going to mention those 4 colors for the CSS. We're also going to say, hey, there's an opened event that will tell you anytime the person opens up this component, when they click on the arrow to open it up, you will get this event bubbling up to you to let you know that it's happened. Now, we said that we wanted to also provide that number. So how do we do that? Well, with a custom event, there is an options object right here that you can provide extra information to pass up. So anything that's serializable, it can be strings, booleans, numbers, things like that. Basically JSON data. Inside of here, there's a property called detail. It's an optional property, but if you add this, this is where you can place the extra information that will be contained inside this custom event when it gets dispatched. So what do we want to put in there? Well, let's put in a property called count and set it equal to this open count. There we go. So we're taking, oh, sorry, need the curly braces around it to say that this thing is an object. There we go. So opened is the type of event. This is the options object. The detail property will have is an object, and it will have a property called count, which will contain the number being passed up. So up inside of here, we should be able to say ev.detail.count. There we go. Saved. Back over here, I click, and the count is 1. I close it, nothing else happens. But if I click and I open, there's the event and there's the count. And so every time I do it, I get this additional information. I get the number of times. So if you want to use that in your code, yeah, we can do that. We can say if ev.detail.count exceeds the number 3, whatever you want to do. Let's just throw an alert onto the page. Say, have you not finished reading it yet? There we go. So first time I get the number, second time I get the number, third time I get the number. But if I do it again, there we are. Now we have the alert popping up here. Now, you don't want this on your final website. Issues with that. Not the recommended approach, but it's just to demonstrate the fact that we do have this information that we can work with on the parent page. We're using a custom event that's not going to be used anywhere else on the website, but we've provided some extra functionality with some custom styling and a custom event. So I hope that all makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comments down below. I answer as many as I have time for. And as always, thanks for watching.